The Rugby Championship needs to align with Six Nations and expand to 6 teams. We've got 2 Six Nation competitions, one Northern Hemisphere, one Southern Hemisphere, and then we can have a World Rugby Championship. That's not the World Cup, but the winner of Six Nations versus the winner of the Rugby Championship. We can finally show every year instead of just every 4 years that the Southern Hemisphere is clearly better than the Northern Hemisphere. Now, what are the 2 teams that I'd bring in to the Rugby Championship? I think Japan is a good one, and I think Fiji is the other one. And then I think you've got a really good core Six Nations there. Fiji did fantastically in this last World Cup. Japan had a solid performance as well. Fiji made it further in the World Cup than Australia did, who's an existing Rugby Championship side. You look at the other Rugby Championship teams, obviously New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, all made it to the semi-finals and beyond in the Rugby World Cup. So you've got a really great level of competition in there that is arguably higher than the Six Nations competition. If you look at the 6 teams that were proposed to be in the Rugby Championship, right? Australia and Japan came third in their pool. Fiji made it into the finals. Argentina made it into the finals. New Zealand and South Africa obviously played the grand final. If you look at the Six Nations, right? Ireland, France, England all made it to the finals. Only England made it to a semi-final. Ireland and France were knocked out round 1. Wales as well made to the finals, I should say as well. I almost in my trauma forgot that. So 4 of their teams made the finals. The same as with the Southern Hemisphere 16s. 2 teams did not make it into the finals, those being Scotland and Italy. So there's parity there in terms of international rugby achievement between these teams. Parity in terms of the competition as well. Obviously, Wales beat Australia in the competition. France and Ireland had victories and losses against New Zealand and South Africa. So I think that would make a really great competition. And then you have a really cool moment during the year where you have the winner of the Six Nations versus the winner of the Rugby Championship. Or you could even do a bit of a bigger tournament than that. You could have the top 2 from each competition, so on and so forth. I think there's so many possibilities here for World Rugby to explore. I think international rugby, as we've said so many times, is the pinnacle of a rugby. It draws in the most fans, draws the most attention, gets the most media, and we just need more of it in our lives, to be quite honest. Yeah. So there are a lot of benefits to this. The downsides are logistics, plannings, and cost, as always, the boring side of things. But I think rugby needs to adapt.
I see what you're saying, and I do agree in principle. Like, I like the idea of aligning. I like the idea of 2 Six Nations tournaments. I like the idea of the winners coming together and squaring off against each other. And I think you could actually sort out the rugby calendar a little bit with this, because you'd play the Six Nations at the same time, I think. I think rather than, as you can see with the Northern Hemisphere, they're playing the Six Nations in the middle of their club season. We're about to kick off, obviously, Super Rugby. I think it would be a really cool way to build into Super Rugby with a Six Nations international, with some of those players missing Super Rugby, so you get some real depth at the start of the season, and then those players come back for Super Rugby. Now, the argument I have as a newfound Englishman, as I live in England now, is Six Nations is the biggest competition in the Northern Hemisphere. And the reason it is the biggest competition is history. Now, I don't, as much as I think Japan brings a lot with money-wise, and I think Fiji coming across is great, the Six Nations or the Rugby Championship already, to me, is saturated. And I would just about argue the point, and I hate having to do this because I love Argentina, but I would argue the point that the best rugby we were seeing from the Southern Hemisphere or the biggest tournament you could argue was a bigger tournament than the Six Nations was the Tri-Nations. When we had the 3 teams that have a lot of history against each other, that dislike each other a lot, that are wanting to go out there and absolutely tear each other apart, are those New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. And I go, comparison to what you've got in Six Nations, where I think it's pretty much the same minus Italy. Like, those 5 nations hate each other and are good enough to tear each other apart. I don't want to saturate the competition even more. Like, Argentina, as good as they've been the past few years, came in and struggled. And yes, I want to grow the game, and I get it. But you could bring out a subsidiary Six Nations with teams. So you'd go Japan, Fiji, Argentina, Tonga, Samoa, someone else in there. And I go, that's probably just about a better argument to have, and have your premier competition. Now, I know it's not growing the game, and I can see that argument. I can definitely see that argument. But for the history and for building on what I'm seeing from the Six Nations at least, is sometimes you grow too much and you lose part of what you were, and the identity of the Tri-Nations has been lost. Like, in my opinion, why do we change from the Tri-Nations to the Rugby Championship? It should have been the Four Nations, if you can ask me. Stuff like that.
I think, I actually agree that it probably should have stuck with the Tri-Nations, but I think, it's very hard to put the jack back in the box once the handle's been turned, So now that you've got Argentina in, I don't think you can take it back out without severely pissing off Argentina and Argentinian rugby. I think they have more than earned their right to stay in the Rugby Championship. They have put up results. They haven't won, but they've put up results against those teams. They made it interesting. They've played spoiler. They've had a good role in there. And I think I really like your point about history, but history changes. History is built as well, right? You have to go through periods of shit, quite honestly, to then come into a good to build that history. Like Argentina in the Rugby Championship is still relatively new as part of that competition. You have to build up the law. You have to build up the rivalries. That rivalries don't just happen. They don't just spring up, right? I mean, you have that subsidiary competition, right? What are the rivalries going to be in that subsidiary competition? Like the Islander rivalry, maybe a little bit, but again, you still have to build up those storylines, build up those rivalries. For me, I think it is. You even said it yourself within the Six Nations. It's like the Five Nations plus Italy, right? And that's and in time, Italy will grow in and be part of those rivalries as well. Although I can guarantee that they hate the English, and I'm sure they hate the French as well, just because everyone hates the French, right? So I think you have something similar in the Rugby Championship. Like Australia, New Zealand, South Africa all hate each other, but I think Argentina has got a strong dislike for New Zealand and Australia as well. I'm not sure what their opinion is on South Africans, but we saw the emotion of Pablo Matera when they beat New Zealand in New Zealand, right? Like that was. For him, that was such a huge moment because he's been there, he's played there, he's heard everything, I'm sure, from the crowds there and things like that. And then to go into your backyard and to win there, that was an emotional moment and a really big rugby storyline. And I think that would be the same with including Japan and Fiji in the competition. At the start, it's going to be rough, right? It's going to require some great. You look at the Fijian Dura and Moana Pacifica, right? It's been rough for Moana Pacifica. The Dura have had some great storylines and they made the finals. Right, I think you just have to, at some point, growth needs to be part of your strategy, and you need to be willing to swallow the lumps that come with that, the growing pains. And I think greater alignment between Northern and Southern Hemisphere will only benefit the game. And I think we see that in soccer a bit as well, where they're all fairly aligned, the different leagues. And I think that's what we've got to come to, is we've got to come together as world rugby, but also still hate each other's guts when we're on the field. But that's what rugby is, though. Rugby is you get on the field, you beat the crap out of each other, and then go have a beer with each other afterwards, right? It's on the field. It's one of the greatest things about rugby. There's none of this American football, filming yourself in the locker room, trash talking, dancing around, making fun of the other team and whatnot, right? You get in there, you play the game hard on the field, have a fight if you need to, and then off the field, you hug the other guy, have a beer. And I think that's what we need to look at from the administration side of things as well, is we want to have the rivalries, we want to have the dislike and things like that, but we want to be all running on the same track because we're all heading towards the same goal.
Yeah, look, I like your argument, and it's hard to argue against. I look at it and I still think that Argentinian loss doesn't hurt me as much as a loss to either Australia or South Africa will. And I'm trying to work out if in my lifetime will ever playing Argentina matter as much as me as playing South Africa.
I think if Argentina wins the Rugby Championship, it will. If they start to become a really good team, if they get a few wins in a row against you, yeah, it will. Or
but do you see that happening?
I think it could. I think that's what the whole point of them being in the Rugby Championship is to keep building. I mean, you can't argue that Argentina has steadily improved over time, right? And part of that has been in their inclusion in competitions like Rugby Championship, Super Rugby, greater involvement with the Southern Hemisphere teams, right? So, yeah, I absolutely believe it could happen.
And off the top of my head, I don't know, but I believe Italy's been in the Six Nations for a very long time. I imagine.
I don't know how long. Let's do a Google of it.
Yeah, I want to say they've come in the late 90s.
2000. So
2000.
yeah, pretty close. Since pretty 2000. Close. Yeah.
So 24 years, and let's be honest. Like, yes, they beat Wales 2 years ago. Like, you go into those Italian games. Yes, they put up a fight against France last year. They put up a fight against a couple other teams, but every single Six Nations team goes into those games expecting to win. And even if they were to lose, like the Welsh one, as much as it sucks for about a year, then you beat them again and then it doesn't matter. Like, I just haven't seen enough from Italy over 24 years to say that Japan and Fiji is going to do that.
I don't think you can compare Italy to those teams, though, right? Like, Italy is such a second priority in Italy compared to football, right? In Argentina, which is one of the most football mad countries in the world, rugby still holds a really special place. Fiji, it is the sport along with rugby league. We have seen that Fiji and Japan can already compete with the teams already in the rugby championship, right? Japan has beaten South Africa in a World Cup. Fiji beat Australia in this most recent World Cup, right? These teams have the capability to do this. The players in the Fijian Dura have beaten players in the All Blacks and Wallaby system in Super Rugby. So I think those teams are all better than Italy. I think if you looked at the Rugby Championship 1-6 expanded, I think you would say it is better than the Six Nations 1-6. I don't know if quality can be an argument. I think your strongest argument is the history and the rivalry and what makes it unique. I think because Tri Nations has been done away with and we've gone to the Rugby Championship, you're never ever going to be able to recapture that. You're never going to be able to go back to the Tri Nations, which sucks because I love the Tri Nations.
Just take me back to the Tri Nations of Super Rugby, Super 12, and I'd be a happy man.
Yeah, I know. Look, yeah, I would be as well. But we have to move on from the mistakes of the past. You know, we have to accept that what happened was probably not the best decision. But where do we go to now? Right, we can't go back to what it was before. There's been too much time, too much change. Argentina has earned their spot. I think it's time now for even more new blood to come in, right? And then I think it is going to take, to get that to that level of dislike, it is just going to take playing more and more games against each other, and you will grow to dislike them more and more and more because you'll see the same players taunting your players every time, sticking their boots into the rock, coming in with a raised elbow. You remember those little moments about things, or they get a call that their way, like the Australia versus Argentina this year in the Rugby Championship, right? The fact that wasn't fucking reviewed at the end still really pisses me off, right? And I can't wait to play him this year. And we get 2 games against them this year, thankfully. So let's fucking dig into them, Like, that sort of stuff sticks with you. I think you
I'm an arrogant
a bit
All Black
blinded
supporter.
by all the success that all the All Blacks have had, whereas you need to get down on the suffering level. I think that's different in Six Nations as well. Like, Six Nations, they all can topsy-turvy. It's a more equal competition than what we've necessarily got in like the Rugby Championship or if we expanded it.
Yeah. Yep. No, I see what you're saying, and let us know in the comments. Should they expand it to 6 teams? Should it be Japan? Should we just try and scrap it and take Luke back in a time machine to Tri Nations and Super 12 rugby? What you could wish
If I thought
for
we
there.
could take it back to the Tri Nations, I'd be all for it, but I don't think we can.
Yeah, no, fair enough. But yeah, let us know in the comments. For now, that is us on expanding the Rugby Championship. This has been That Rugby Podcast hosted by the Sports Booth. We'll see you later. Goodbye.
Peace.